we get some revenge on somebody who would go so low as to steal candy and soda? We'll get to that in a bit, but first, X's OP shop gifts to me. Long story short, my abusive and sociopathic ex used to bring me little gifts of whatever he'd found in the op shops in his neighborhood and mine. Some of these were really lovely, and I was grateful for the fact that he actually never turned up at my place empty-handed. He did pretend to have manners, but it was just a ruse. But sometimes he would give me a really nice-looking item, let's say a silver-toned ring with clear stones, then proceed to lie and tell me that the silver metal was platinum and that the stones were diamonds of the finest quality our country produces. What the freak? I think he was just trying to convince himself more than I that the item was fake as a smile, so I didn't say anything and just let him be a deceitful jerk. We split almost the day a year ago, and I'm finally taking the trash out. It's going back to the op shops he frequents today so he can find the crappy gifts back where he got them. The police and I have a 13-year intervention order against him. He breached this more times than I can count. Threatened to kill me, threatened to shoot my children, etc., etc. If this action makes me feel better, then I'm willing to be petty and take the risk of bumping into him with his new fiancée. 4 days after declaring that I was the love of his life, he's engaged to some junkie hooar. Gotta love that. Call me petty, but this is my closure after all the crappy things I put up with. I feel like maybe OP kind of breezed through some serious stuff that could have been a little bit more drawn out so you really got time to really understand what exactly went down. I'll tell you what though, that guy definitely did not sound like a keeper to me. Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you enjoy awesome stories of revenge, why not hit that subscribe button down below? That said, our next story is Lawyer Threatened to Sue Me for a 1-star review. Now his 1-star reviews are going viral. Lawyer scammed me and my family to the point where we're seeking recourse in court. I left the lawyer a 1-star review, and the lawyer threatened to sue me for defamation. It was all true if I didn't remove that review. It all backfired as I added that fact to my review. Now the lawyer's getting tons of upvotes on my review and random 1-star reviews harassing him from everywhere. He even got a 1-star review from the Northwest Territories of Canada. They're so secluded from the rest of Canada that I didn't even know, in my naivety, that they spoke English up there. The lawyer who did me wrong is now a laughing stock. I know it sucks to be a business owner or provide some kind of service and be on a review website and to get a negative review, but it's kind of just one of those things that you gotta take on the chin and just hope that you can provide good enough service to enough people to completely outweigh that one bad review. I mean, whether or not this person was lying, it just rarely looks good when you're out here replying or chasing down these bad reviews, especially if you're threatening them with lawsuits. Our next story is Bully Me and Try to Sabotage My College Application. Good luck getting into college. I just ran into my old high school teacher and was reminded of this, so I thought I'd post it here. Back when I was in high school, I got really sick at the beginning of my senior year and had to take a long leave of absence. By the time I got better, not only did I basically have to do that year all over again, but it meant all of my friends had graduated. I was miserable and feeling all alone. And worst of all, I was the stereotypical smart kid, who also now happened to be older than they were, so I got picked on a lot as well. We were taking a test when there was an emergency and the teacher had to step outside for a few minutes. The other students were trying to get me to give them the answers to the questions when Leia, one of the more popular students, stepped in and told them to knock it off. She seemed kind and helpful, and we became fast friends. Back then, college applications required sealed letters of recommendations to be mailed in by the student, and the programs I was applying to required 2 letters of recommendation. I decided to get 3 just in case. One of them was from my English literature teacher, because although I was applying to science programs, and had already been promised letters of recommendations from 2 of my science teachers, I wanted to show that I had broad interests. Mr. M was surprised to be asked, but agreed, and he asked me to give him a 2-page essay about myself, so he could flesh out the letter of recommendation. I appreciated that he was taking it so seriously and worked hard on that essay. However, he took so long that he only gave me the letter of recommendation literally the day before the applications were to be sent out. On top of that, he left the envelope unsealed and told me to take a look before mailing it. I actually ended up being really thankful to him since it wasn't all that positive, so I ended up discarding it. I didn't really think much of it since it wasn't like every teacher had to like me. However, as soon as our applications were mailed, Leah's attitude changed 180 degrees. At lunch, she told me no one liked me and that she'd only tolerated me so I could help her get into college. Bullying then resumed in earnest, and she also spread several private things about myself to the other students so I could be further humiliated. It took me a while, but I realized she shouldn't have known about a few of those things since I never told her, until I realized it was information that was in the essay I'd written for Mr. M, which was when I also found out from one of my friends in college that Leah was Mr. M's niece. And it became clear to me that the letter of recommendation was intended to be sabotage, because had I not gotten 3, I would have been screwed. My applications would have been deemed incomplete, and I would have had to apply the next year. I was furious, but there was nothing I could do. I no longer had any classes with Mr. M, and had no proof the letter of recommendation was sabotage, or that he'd given her access to my essay. And it was possible that Leah was the sole party responsible and Mr. M had no part in anything. So I just resigned myself to a hellish senior year and spent as much time as possible in the school library, since that was the only place I got a reprieve from my tormentors. I was fortunate enough to receive an early acceptance to the programs I'd applied to. Leah, however, was not so lucky. Despite not being that good of a student and not having met all the prerequisites, she'd still applied to the best schools in the area and ended up not getting any early acceptance letters. And by the time she did receive one, it was a conditional offer contingent on our final GPA, which then gave me the perfect means of revenge. Leah was the type to overshare information, and she wasn't exactly quiet when complaining about her grades. So it was easy enough to keep track. By the time our final month of high school approached, I knew she was relying on Mrs. T's class to pull her through. Mrs. T was really nice, and she wanted everyone to succeed, and she also knew that for a lot of seniors, her class was either really important or completely unnecessary. So she always gave a final group project and a final exam that were worth a significant chunk of the grade. But the students had the option of doing only one or both. If you only did one, that grade applied to both. But if you did both, whichever one was higher was your grade for both. Because the group project was graded before the final exam, there was time to study should you need a better grade. And she also curved the exam score as well, just to give everyone the best chance. Being that I was the best student in the class and Mrs. T liked me, I asked her if I could be assigned to the same group as Leah and her friends, which she readily agreed to do. Leah and her friends crowed about their luck, assuming that they could skip it all and I would be forced to do all the work. Except they forgot that there was essentially no penalty for skipping this project. They were horrified when I told them, the day before the project was due, that I didn't do it. And Leah in particular was now in trouble, since in order to attain the necessary GPA, she had to do well on the final exam. For about a week, she apologized, tried to bribe me, and even begged me to go easy so the grading curve would be in her favor. I did no such thing, of course. I studied as hard as I'd ever done and aced it. My 100% meant there was no curve, and while Leah passed the class, it wasn't enough to boost her GPA. Word soon got around that she didn't get into college, and she had to take summer classes and an extra year to reapply. I made sure to give Mr. M a big smile when I saw him at graduation. It might have seemed like more trouble than it's worth, but I feel like Mr. M should have been reported in some way here. I guess like OP said, the burden of proof was just not enough. I guess Mr. M covered their tracks enough to make it look like that was just candidly their letter of recommendation, even though I don't know if I've ever heard of a letter of recommendation being negative, without it intentionally being malicious. This next story is, here's your cup of diabetes, enjoy. Recently, I went to a meat and 3 restaurant and ordered sweet tea like I normally do. The waitress informed me that they had extremely good sweet tea and that it was very, very sweet. I cockily told her, well, good, I like it really, really sweet. and that there's no such thing as too sweet, and that there's no way in heck that it'll ever be too sweet for me to drink. She even gave me an out and asked, "You sure about that? 'Cause we make it fresh and we can make it very, very sweet." Yes, I know when someone says you sure about that, you always take the way out. I, of course, did not take it and said 100%, you can't make it. She said all right and went back to the kitchen. A few minutes later, she returned with everyone's drinks. The first sip, I knew I messed up. It was so darn sweet, I tasted pure sugar, not a hint of tea. "You like it?" she asked. "Is it sweet enough?" "Yeah, it's, pretty sweet," forcing myself to take another sip. After 2 more sips being choked down and tasting what the normal sweet tea tasted like, she brought over a half-empty unsweet cup to dilute the sugar. She said that her and the cook had a lot of fun making it, and that it was funny watching me try to drink it. We laughed about it with her, and the other people in my party took turns taking a sip just to see how sugary it was. After the meal, when we were about to leave, I looked at the glass, and there was a 1/4 of an inch of undissolved sugar sitting at the bottom. Well, we can't let that sugar go to waste. Now that all that sugar's undissolved at the bottom, just pour it right back into the sugar jar. It's still good. I don't know if the FDA would allow me to run a restaurant. This next story is Narcissist Mom Exposed. My family is pretty complex, but I, 46-year-old female, have always been the scapegoat child that my narcissistic mom blames all of her troubles on. My parents are divorced and remarried to others, but in the past she had been really awful to me in private and acted like the best mom ever around others. Additionally, anytime we would fight, she would preemptively tell my dad, stepmom, and brothers about it from her perspective first, making me sound emotional, unhinged, and crazy so that no one would believe me if I tried to ask for understanding or help. My stepmom was the only one that believed me because she took the time to get to know me and knew that what my mom was saying didn't line up with my character. She was my light in the darkness through years and years of this, but she couldn't convince my dad otherwise. There were times my mom would scream at me and trash me to my face and then call my brothers crying that I was being so mean to her, so they would gang up on me and give me a talking to for how I treated mom. I'm not one to easily cry or throw emotional fits because I've learned to just hide my feelings and stonewall my mother to avoid giving her anything to talk about. But one day, my brothers called me and I said, "You have no idea what I've been through. When our parents divorced when we were kids, one of you went to live with dad and the other with grandma. I was stuck with her through divorce, remarriage, fighting with her new husband, her having more kids, postpartum depression, all of it. I was stuck with her while you guys were off living your best lives." After that conversation, my brother stopped trying to bother me about fights with mom, but my mom's friends and my dad still often bothered me about it. Fast forward to my first pregnancy with my son when I was 36. I had high blood pressure, and she kept screaming at me for how I wanted to birth and raise my child. I finally told her I have high blood pressure and she's making it worse. So I'm going to go no contact during the pregnancy, and if she can get her crap together, she can meet the baby when he's born. She deleted me on Facebook as her friend and told all of her friends and our family that I accused her of trying to kill my unborn child. Big eye roll. My dad came over to talk to me about it, and luckily my stepmom came with him. I explained about no contact and that I wasn't going to change my mind since the baby's health was more important. My dad eventually gave up, and my stepmom urged him to just accept that this was for best. Closer to the birth, I had a baby shower that my sister-in-law threw. She asked if she should invite my mom. I said that it was okay since there would be so many people there. I wouldn't likely spend any one-on-one time with her, and it was a huge shower. My mom's best friend even drove up for it, and she lives 4 hours away. Towards the end of the shower, my mom cornered me with her best friend, and they didn't know that my stepmom had been videoing a lot of the shower. And when she saw this, she turned her phone camera on the 3 of us. Mom started asking questions about the pregnancy and birth, and her best friend goes, "She's put all that on Facebook. Haven't you seen it?" I said, "She removed me as her Facebook friend." My mom's face turned bright red. I said, "I'll add you back if you want to read all the updates about the pregnancy." She said, "Okay." Her friend turned to her and asked why she deleted me. She said we got into a fight and she was trying to punish me for not listening. Her best friend knows her well and says, "Sounds like you punished yourself instead." When my stepmom got home, she played the video for my dad. He had never seen her that way before, and he never accused me of mistreating my mom again. He mostly just stayed out of it. Even better, a couple of days before my son was born, my mom called me, begging to be a part of her grandchildren's lives. I said, "Let me think about it." I called her back the day I was going to be in to give birth to my son and said, "I'm willing to allow you to see the kids when I'm around, but there will be rules." I sent her a list of 7 rules she had to follow, including things like never talk negatively about me or my husband around the kids, never bring up the past between us, no more trying to control my decisions, etc. I told her I wouldn't hesitate to kick her out of our lives for good if she broke the rules. The kids are now 7 and 9 years old, and she's never broken a single rule. She wanted grandchildren more than she wanted to use me as a scapegoat. They've never been left alone with her. Me or my husband will continue to be present as they spend time with her, but she's been a decent grandma to them and has kept the agreement 100%. Although they could have been better to you, it's nice to see that they're able to follow that agreement at least. I guess that's proof that they're not all bad, right? Our next story is, they are my fish hooks, and I'll dry them where I darn well please. A guy I know had a small cabin for hunting and fishing, and he kept it locked when he wasn't there because he had some belongings inside. The cabin kept getting vandalized, and when he called the police, they said that there was really nothing they could do. A few weeks later, he called the police and reported another break-in and said that there was blood all over the cabin. When the police got to the cabin, they found that he nailed fishing hooks along the perimeter of the inside of the cabin windows. They told him that he couldn't set up traps to catch people like that, and that he could be charged with bodily harm. The old guy said, "Officer, those are my fish hooks, and I don't want them to rust. I will dry them where I darn well please." The break-in stopped after that. Obviously, this guy seemed to have accounted for that. But when the police say, "Sorry, we can't help you in any way here," what really are you left to do but to fortify that place in a way that deters these people from keeping on breaking in? Our next story is blew over missing newspapers. I had subscribed to the newspaper for years without a problem. When I moved all of a sudden, my newspapers came up missing every morning. Every morning I'd have to call the office and they'd drop off another copy later in the day or give me a credit for the missing paper. So annoying since I knew it was being delivered. Now, the new house was located by a park where people walking in the neighborhood would walk to and around. I figured it was probably an early morning walker grabbing the paper. One morning I set my alarm for 4:30. And when the paper was thrown in the driveway, I went out with a small flat container and a bottle of blue Rit dye. I unfolded the paper, put the container into the paper, poured in the dye, and refolded carefully. Then I went back to bed. When I went out to get the paper later in the morning, it was there, and blue. There was also an outline showing where the dye had been spilled on someone's shoes and legs. Never had another paper go missing after that. Wonder how they explained that to family and friends. This is kind of like the old school version of like those package glitter bombs. There's honestly nothing more fun than harmlessly defacing a thief. This next story is, sister-in-law insulted my kids, so I exposed her lies. Sister-in-law is the kind of mom that always has to one-up other kids. She constantly talks about how her kids are smarter, taller, faster, etc. than her friends' kids. She literally bragged about them peeing more than her friends' kids when they were babies. It was worse when my husband and I had our twins. Suddenly everything was a competition, that her kids always won. One of my girls rolled over at 4 months. Her son had rolled over when he was just a week old. The twins both took their first steps around 13 months. Her daughter was running at 4 months. She didn't actually start walking until around 16 months. She even changed the weight of her kids' birth weights, which makes them both heavier than the current heaviest newborn in America. It's so weird that she feels the need to tell such obvious lies, especially to people who know she's lying because they were there when her kids were small. I got annoyed when she went from lying about her own kids to telling me there's something wrong with mine. My girls are a few months shy of 2, and they're both healthy, on track, and eating their milestones. Sister-in-law has become obsessed with the idea that there is something wrong with them because they're not speaking in long sentences. Of course they're not. They're not even 2. They're both developmentally on track, but she insists that her children were speaking in 5 to 6 word phrases by 18 months. Spoiler, they were not. Honestly, her son's almost 7, and I can still barely understand a word the kid says. My husband and I ignored her, but she took it too far when I got a call from her friend who works in early intervention, who was under the impression that I was very concerned about my children. We talked, and her friend confirmed that yes, they are on track, and no, there's nothing to worry about. I finally lost my patience. Hey, her kids are breaking almost every record there is, and that should be celebrated. We had dinner with my husband's family on Saturday. Kids were in another room, and I decided it was the perfect time to give her my gift. A booklet I had printed and laminated called The White Claw Book of World Records. I printed all the supposed milestones of her kids, complete with photos and info of the actual world record holders now that they'd been pushed to the 2nd place. She flipped through the first couple of pages, went beet red, and called me a jerk. Her husband took it from her and got through the first page before laughing hysterically and asking her why the heck she was still lying. Apparently it wasn't the first time they'd talked about her lying about their kids. She stormed out but texted me later that night and asked me why I'd humiliated her when all she'd ever tried to do was help me get my kids the help they needed. But if that's how I wanted to treat her, then she'd stop. So I guess it's a win for me. I say at least they went beet red instead of going the full modern form of politics where they just double down and say, despite the statistics, actually my kids are, yes, breaking every single record there is. Our next story is, my roommate is so mean to me, so I'm moving out and taking my stuff with me. For some context, my roommate is kind to me 75% of the time, but the leftover 25% of the time, they're so mean it's not even funny. They snap at me for things outside of my control. They yelled at me for chewing too loudly. I was eating chips in the middle of the day. They take naps all the time and told me I could feel free to make noise, but yelled at me for taking a phone call and whispering. They cussed me off for eating food that I thought was mine. And worst of all, they posted a TikTok bashing me and my partner. Now, I decided to move out, and I told them that. I got my new room assignment, and I'm moving out this weekend. As I'm planning my move, I'm realizing that almost all of the shared stuff in our room is mine. The fridge is mine, the trash can is mine, the vacuum is mine, the pots, pans, cooking stuff is mine, the cleaning supplies are mine. My roommate and I both had fridges, and we decided I'd bring mine and they'd leave theirs at home. So now they're stuck without a fridge. Serves them right too, because they let stuff spill in the fridge and now it's super sticky, so I have to clean it. Whenever they're being nice to me, I feel bad. But the moment they snap at me, all of my guilt goes right out the window. It feels great to realize that you're taking all of that stuff with you and you're going to leave them with nothing. But let's also point out the obvious. That's what you should do. Like, in no way should you be leaving your stuff behind. What kind of weird courtesy would that be? This next story is, Karens lack common decency and get stuck in an elevator. I was visiting my grandfather in the hospital a few days ago, and the hospital he was in is one of the biggest in our state. It's basically a maze of hallways, and there's so many floors that the elevators take forever to pick you up. As I was leaving, I had to wait 5 minutes for the first elevator to arrive. Unfortunately, when it opened, there were 2 very large men standing there with their arms folded, just staring at me unmoving. I've seen this episode of BuzzFeed Unsolved before, so I decided to wait for the next one. Nearly 10 minutes go by before the next elevator arrives, and when it does, there's 3 women standing in it. One of them leaves, and I exclaim, "Oh, finally!" before trying to rush to get in before the doors start closing. The 2 remaining women watch as I rush forward, reaching to stop the doors. Usually one would push the button to keep the doors open. Basic human decency, but they couldn't be bothered. They watched as my hand got stuck in the elevator. They watched as they saw me begin panicking, trying to wrench my hand out before the elevator started moving. All the while, the button to open the doors is right there. Eventually, I was able to free my hand, leaving a 4-inch space in the door. I then got to listen as the doors struggled to close again, and the elevator seemed to give up. Then I got to hear them A, realize they were stuck, B, try and fail to make the doors close, and C, have to press the call button to get help. They were still stuck as the next elevator pulled up and I boarded. And they were still stuck as I left. All of this could have been avoided with the press of a button. Literally serves them right. I would be wishing so much worse on them beyond getting stuck in an elevator if they watched me get my hand stuck in the elevator and didn't try to help. Our next story is steal my candy and sodas? I'll temporarily wreck your taste buds. Several years ago, I worked at a major pet retail store. I had a morning shift that entailed me arriving a couple of hours prior to the store opening to clean critter cages and feed the fish and animals and whatnot. There was another crew that arrived earlier than I did that was in charge of restocking on delivery days twice a week. We had a community break room with the usual fridge, microwave, table, and small lockers. There was also a snack machine and a Coke machine. I would keep the snacks in my locker, but I really enjoyed Reese's Peanut Butter Cups chilled, so I kept a couple of those, along with 2 bottles of Coca-Cola and a mini storage container in the fridge. I was happy to share as long as permission was asked. I bought my snack needs at Costco, so it was no big deal to share, and my coworkers always reimbursed me a little. It was cheaper to buy from me than the snack machines. One day, I noticed I was missing a soda and candy bar from my little box in the fridge. No big deal other than no one had asked. They also didn't leave any reimbursement. I blew it off, figuring they must have really needed a pick-me-up and forgot to bring something. Then it happened a couple more times. I put a note in the box requesting that if they wanted something that they needed to ask and not just take, and that if they were going to just take, they needed to leave a couple dollars behind. It happened 2 more times before I came up with my plan to wreck their taste buds. It wasn't that they were taking just 1 Coke. They were taking both and all the Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. Since this was a pet store, we carried the nasty stuff that keeps dogs from licking themselves. It came in an ointment and a spray. We also had vinegar on hand for wiping down the acrylic fish tank fronts. It was something safe to use around aquarium fish, and we used it for a couple other things too. I carefully opened a bottle of Coca-Cola, poured about 1/3 of it out, and replaced most of it with vinegar and the remainder with the bitter liquid. I then took some of the bitter ointment and smeared a thin layer along the top and screwed the lid back on. I locked the Reese's in my locker and put the special bottle of Coke back in my box in the fridge. The trap was set, and I just had to wait for the thief to take it. I suspected it was one of the early morning guys, since the missing stuff always seemed to coincide with that shift. The next morning when I came in, the bottle of Coke was gone. I wish I could have seen the look on his face when he took a sip of the specially prepared drink. I guarantee he tasted the bitter stuff every time he licked his lips for the next couple hours. I left a new note in my storage box the next day, warning them that it would happen again if they stole from me. I never had missing drinks or snacks again. I love the idea that this person swore off trying to take them anymore, thinking, wow, all these people must just really have awful taste enjoying that stuff. Or maybe they knew it was targeted. Maybe they were afraid they got poisoned. I hope they did get worked up about it. That would be great revenge. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another awesome story of revenge, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.